Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to The Last Symptom podcast. I'm Brian Barnett, the creator and host of The Last Symptom. I appreciate you joining me. This is a special episode of The Last Symptom podcast. In this episode, I'm going to help you understand what is involved with learning to love yourself for real. And so there's several subtitles to this discussion that we're going to consider. The first one is being able to love yourself for real is better than being loved in return, and then we're actually going to come back around to that. Another subtitle that we're going to discuss is I do already love myself. Are you sure? Let's have a discussion about that to make sure. We're going to talk about how you can determine if you don't love yourself for real, even if you feel like you do. Finally, we're going to talk about how to love yourself for real. We're going to talk about why not being able to love yourself for real prevents you from loving others for real. We're going to talk about the reason being able to love for real is more fulfilling than being loved in return. And then we'll summarize everything and tie it all up and wrap it all up with a bow. Before we get started, we have to do the musical introduction and the disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way, and I'll be right here when that ends. I'm Brian Barnett. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a doctor. I have no legal license in any field of psychology. But I did live a large part of my life with borderline personality disorder unknowingly. And I really did rid myself of the disorder completely and permanently. Through that, I've become an expert on issues involving emotional health. I accept no responsibility whatsoever for your feelings, thoughts, behaviors, decisions, and actions, including your decision to watch or listen to this show at all. But I do hope you might benefit yourself from the insights I share. Before we get started in this episode's discussion, thelastsymptom.com continues to be my website full of free and paid resources. Please check us out over there. The Last Symptom Fundamentals course is a 2-week intensive pre-recorded course. It's me on video, and it lays down the foundation for authentic recovery from emotional disorders. It's every insight that I needed for myself to then build upon and to be able to escape borderline personality disorder for myself, which was my emotional disorder, in a permanent and authentic way. And so it's just me sharing that with you. If you'd be interested in that course, it's over at thelastsymptom.com. Just look in the paid resources tab. Again, it's a 2-week intensive pre-recorded course that is designed specifically to slingshot you far ahead into your authentic recovery. Finally, if you haven't joined us over on our locals community, you're missing out. It's one of the most important aspects of my work with The Last Symptom now happens over on the locals platform. That's our online community, and you can join us by going to thelastsymptom.locals.com in your web browser, or by downloading the locals.com app from the App Store and then searching for The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett. You're missing out. If you're not part of our community, you're missing out. And so, I don't completely understand all of the reasons why preventing folks from doing that, but it supports my work, and if there's no support, I can't keep doing the work. So it's a nice and easy and very, 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 very low-cost way to support my work and show me that you appreciate the time and energy that I put into this and the years that I've now put into this. I understand that the podcast here is important to a lot of people, and I appreciate that. I'm glad that it's important to you. But it's just one element to the whole thing. Another thing I'd like to mention is that I've never received a cent for any of these episodes of the podcast. over 500,000 downloads. I have not received a single cent for any of these episodes of this podcast. So I appreciate that you appreciate the Last Symptom podcast. If you would like to show me that you really appreciate the Last Symptom podcast, the way to do that is to join our online community. Show some courage. Join a community of people that are working on the same things you are. And you know what you can expect over there is you can expect daily interactions on these topics. So with lots of people who are dealing with the same sorts of things, they're asking a lot of questions that you're wondering about that I'm only answering on our community. It's an opportunity for you to interact with me one-on-one at no cost beyond a supporter's cost, which I think now is $5. So that's just something I would like to encourage you to do. Let's get into this discussion about what's involved with loving yourself for real. A lot of people I talk to say, I don't dislike myself. When I listen to the things you talk about, I don't dislike myself. We're going to talk here in a little bit to find out if that's really the case. But right now, the topic that I want to talk about is how being able to love for real is far superior to being loved for real. And to start this discussion, I want to tell you something I see a lot of people doing, something I once tried to do. And by the way, it's 9 million. I'm like on the surface of the sun today. It's 9 million degrees outside, so I've got fans going, I've got the air conditioner going, I got everything going, a lot of noise. I'm hoping it's not getting picked up on the microphone, but if it seems like I'm screaming at you, because I'm trying to hear myself and talk over top of those things. So one thing that I observe in a lot of people, and that I once did myself, is that I tried to get the reward ahead of the things I needed to do in order to get the reward. So don't ever get the reward in the thing you need to do in reverse order. You can't skip over the things you need to be doing and realistically expect to get the reward you're after. So what is the thing that you need to be doing in order to get the rewards that you're hoping for? What sorts of rewards am I talking about? I'm talking about all the rewards that come with being healthy. So you're thinking about usually unhealthy people, their hopes and motivations revolve around relationships. You want a happy relationship. What do you got to do to get that reward? You got to love yourself. You don't want to be known as having a hair-triggered temper. What do you got to do in order to get the reward of not having a hair-trigger temper? You have to love yourself. You want to experience inner peace and contentment. That's the reward. What do you got to do to get the reward? You got to love yourself. So you see, everything goes back to loving yourself. And so it's a pretty important thing to be able to do for real in an authentic and genuine way in order to get the reward. But don't get the reward and the thing you have to do in the wrong order, in the reverse order. The thing you need to do is love yourself. So then the next question is, well, how do I do that? Why? Why do I have to love myself in order to get those things? First of all, to answer that question, I want you to pay attention to the wording that I just used. What did I say that the thing you had to do was in order to get the reward, whatever that reward for you is as it relates to emotional health? What's the thing I said you have to do? I said you have to love yourself. Now, perhaps when you hear that, you think that the only meaning that I intend with that is that you have to be able to love you yourself. In other words, self-love. Well, that's an important one. It's a really important one. But that's not its only meaning. What's another meaning of love yourself? It means you have to be able to love, put love out into the world. You understand? So, two meanings. And one of those meanings is that you have to be able to experience self-love in an authentic way. But the other meaning is that you have to be able to give love to others. Love yourself. You have to be able to love yourself. You have to be able to experience authentic self-love. But that's not its only meaning. You also have to be able to authentically love others. Are you authentically loving? That is, putting authentic love out to others, yourself. Authentic love. What does that mean? Authentic love means that it's not just what you feel. Love is not a feeling. It doesn't mean it doesn't involve feelings. It just means that that's not where it originates from. That's not the entirety of it. That's not the nature of it. The nature of love is not just feelings of affection. Love is a quality rooted in principle. Because of that, love will behave many times in a way that is contrary to what a person is feeling. So a lot of times, the feelings of affection or whatever will be saying, I don't want to do this. But because love is a quality rooted in principle, many, many, many times, it says, I have to do this thing anyway that my feelings say I don't want to do. So far we've talked about how the answer to the reward, or the things you need to do in order to obtain whatever reward you're walking around with. Like when you're thinking about, man, I'd love to be healthy because, whatever that because thing is, we've answered what it is you have to do in order to get the because. You can't skip ahead to the because and then catch up later and then do these things you got to do. The things you've got to do have to come first in order to get the reward. So whatever this thing is, another fascinating part of the riddle that I can attest to from real life experience is that this thing that you have to do in order to get whatever reward you're imagining is much more fulfilling, infinitely more fulfilling than you being loved in return. Let me say that again. Being able to love genuinely yourself is infinitely more fulfilling than you being loved in return. But it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. It can't be of the fake, artificial type of the world's idea of love that says love is nothing more than your emotions. Remember what I said. Love is not emotions. Love is not just feelings. It's a quality rooted in healthy principle. If it's genuine and you're able to experience it genuinely, the being loved in return part, from my personal experience, I can attest to this, is simply not all that important to life. The most important thing is that you be able to love, not that somebody love you. So being able to love in an authentic way is the answer to all of your problems. It involves first being able to love you yourself, that is self-love. And then once you're doing that, that opens up the way for you to love others, for you to be putting love out to others in an authentic way. And then once you're doing that, this question of who's ever going to love me becomes mute and irrelevant. How's come? Because fulfillment is not to be found there. True fulfillment is not to be found in who loves me. true fulfillment is to be found in, am I able to love for real in an authentic and genuine way? That brings us to the next subtitle of I do already love myself. Let me say this. You don't love yourself genuinely and authentically as long as you either consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously view yourself as one, unlovable, or two, as your value not being inherent to you. These two things, not viewing yourself as lovable, and number two, not viewing your value or your worth as inherent to you, these two things make you loving yourself, no matter how much you might think you do, completely impossible. Unlovable, that word. Unlovable. What does that word mean? There's profound insights to be had in just that word, unlovable. That word is a type of word that indicates the way you view your inherent, permanent, unchangeable reality. It's describing something's permanent state or reality. Unlovable. Unchangeable. It's like a raccoon. You're talking about a raccoon will always be a raccoon. When you talk about something as being unlovable, you're talking about a permanent, unchangeable condition. It is what it is, and it's stuck that way. So let me say it again. If you view yourself as unlovable, whether consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, this means you are thinking of this being a reality that you're dealing with in an inherent, permanent, unchangeable way. It's what you are. You are unlovable. You're not just being unloved. You are unlovable. It's what you are. And I can't stress that enough, how important that is to understand. You see, when we say that, if I were to say, for example, that I'm unloved, well, then the solution to that is very easy. I just go and I find somebody to love me. Loved and unloved simply expresses a superficial, temporary, changeable state. But when we talk about unlovable, we're not talking about a superficial, temporary, changeable state anymore. Instead, unlovable describes a permanent, an inherent, permanent, unchangeable reality. It's like this thing come into the world being this, and this is what it will always be. So if you view yourself as unlovable, this means the way you view your inherent, unchangeable, let me say it again. If you view yourself as unlovable, this means the way you view your inherent, unchangeable, permanent reality is that your existence in and of itself doesn't merit love. That your being, your existence, doesn't qualify for it. You don't qualify for it just on the merits of your existence. Another way to say, describe unlovable is that it means that a thing is incapable of being loved. Not that it's just not loved. It means it's incapable of being loved. Now, I hope you stick around for the rest of this discussion because I talk about this a little bit more later in the show. But can you see how when a person views herself or himself as unlovable, which is describing the views that that person has toward their permanent, unchangeable, inherent condition, their unchangeable reality, how that makes it impossible for you to love yourself. So a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, how do I love myself? The answer is you have to remove that obstacle. There's an obstruction preventing it from happening. What is the obstruction? The obstruction is one's own views towards self, the nature of self. What is the realities about me? My nature. What is the true reality about my nature? And the person with an emotional disorder, unknowingly, and once you start doing this work, you may still unknow it, not know it. So in that case, it's a subconscious or unconscious belief. Before you even start down this road, it's an unconscious belief. Once I start talking about it and you start doing a self-analysis, it might be subconscious. It needs to become conscious. You have to consciously see it. I do view myself that way. And almost all the people I talk to at the beginning deny it. I don't dislike myself. I don't feel that way about myself. I don't view myself as unlovable. Well, if you're having trouble loving yourself, you do. You do. Your views toward your inherent realities, the nature of self, your existence, the nature of your existence, the nature of what you are, these views that you walk around with they're what determine if you are able to love yourself for real or not. So anybody having trouble with this, with loving himself or herself, is walking around with these views. Let me illustrate it. Let's talk about respect. Let's say that you believe it's your moral obligation to respect a certain person. Let's say it's a person holding a high position of authority. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's a courtroom judge. Maybe it's the leader of your country. But let's also say that your view of this person is that they're completely devoid of any qualities worthy of respect whatsoever. Would it be possible for you to genuinely respect this person anyway, just because you think it's something you're supposed to do? Or in order to get something else, it's something you have to do? Like, in order for me to get this reward, I have to respect this person. Is it possible for you to genuinely, in an authentic way, respect that person and at the same time view that person as being devoid of any qualities worthy of respect? The answer is no. Not as long as you live with this view that this person is devoid of any qualities worth respecting. You see, what I'm describing here is that you're walking around with the view that this person doesn't even belong in that position to start with. And the fact that that person is in that position, from your point of view, is an affront to all that is right, an affront to the way things are supposed to be. So there's no possible way for these two things to coexist. This view that you have toward this person, and at the same time, you being able to genuinely respect the person. Do you see how one completely disallows the other from being able to occur? The views you have of that person, that you're viewing them as devoid of any quality or aspect of themselves that is worthy of respect. And we're saying at the same time, will you be able to respect them? No, not with those views that you hold. The views that you hold determine, they are what determine whether or not you can genuinely respect that person. Let's use another example. admiration. Is it possible to authentically admire somebody that you view of being devoid of any admirable qualities or traits whatsoever? Of course not. I hope this is helping you see the natural relationship between the way we view things as either allowing or disallowing certain other things. Now, I want you to notice something that all three of these things have in common. Love, respect, admiration. These are the three examples. These are the three things we were just talking about. What do they all have in common? Ask yourself this: can they be faked? Can love, respect, admiration be faked? Can a person just go through superficial motions and claim that they're experiencing the real thing? So if I just behave like I admire somebody, or I behave like I respect them, is that the same as me genuinely experiencing admiration or genuinely experiencing respect? Admiration, for an example, is pretending to admire somebody or just imitating the way that people express admiration. Is this the same thing as experiencing admiration within yourself for real? Of course it's not. It can't be faked. And it doesn't just come into being simply because a person mimics some behaviors or facial expressions or verbal expressions. In other words, just because I go through the motions of what I think admiration looks like and how it behaves and how people behave when and talk when they are experiencing admiration for real, just me going through those motions does not bring it into existence for real. What does experiencing admiration for somebody or something in an authentic way depend on? It depends on the same thing that love and respect and every other thing depends on. It depends on your viewpoint. What viewpoint are you truly walking around with? What viewpoint or perspective are you walking around with? That's what it depends on. Is it your viewpoint or your perspective that there is something admirable there? If you genuinely view something as being admirable, then what will happen? What will happen if you're viewing something as admirable? You know what will happen. You'll experience admiration. So what does you experiencing admiration for real depend on? It depends on you being able to view the thing as admirable. So you can't take away the part where your view is that something is admirable and at the same time experience admiration for real, can you? So is the seriousness of your views of your inherent nature beginning to make sense? Remember, the question is, how do I love myself? Can you view yourself as being something that doesn't, on its own merit, just by your mere existence, warrant respect, admiration, patience, dignity, love, and at the same time love yourself in any genuine way? Of course not. One depends on the other. Absent the correct view or perspective, the other thing becomes stupidly impossible. Stupidly impossible. Meaning so impossible, it's a wonder that people think they can have one thing without the other thing being in place. How can you determine if you don't love yourself for real, even if you feel like you do? The law of genuine attitude reflection. Because here's what the law of genuine attitude reflection says. It says that the way that a person naturally behaves around a thing cannot betray the perspective that the person lives with, truly lives with, toward that thing. Does that make sense? The law of genuine attitude reflection. However I naturally behave toward a thing or around a thing, that is a perfect mirror for whatever my true attitudes are toward that thing. Now, the reason why I say naturally is because anybody can fake behaviors for a period of time. But that's not natural behaviors. That's imitating that's somebody going through the steps of what they think they're supposed to do. Natural behaviors are born from whatever perspectives we truly have. So, for example, if I can lie and I can say that I love rats. But if you observe me long enough around rats, my behaviors will reveal whether what I'm telling you is true or not. The way I behave around rats and with rats, no matter how hard I try to fake it, eventually the truth will come out. My natural behaviors, the way that I genuinely feel around rats, the way I genuinely view them, my attitudes toward rats will reveal themselves in my natural behaviors around rats. So the law of genuine attitude reflection doesn't lie. And it's such a valuable tool because we often lie. As people, we often lie. We lie to ourselves. And I'm not saying that it's always done in a nefarious way. So, for example, all the people I talk to, and in the first early conversations with them, they all say, no, I don't feel that way about myself. I like myself. I love myself. I don't hate myself. I don't view myself as unlovable. Well, that's funny because the things they're telling me about themselves is revealing to me that they do view themselves as unlovable, because if they didn't, this is not the way that they would be behaving and acting and all these things. So the law of genuine attitude reflection doesn't lie. It's I want you to think about it as like an instrument panel inside the cockpit of your airplane that is flying blind through clouds or in the pitch dark. Do you understand that when pilots become pilots, they have the opportunity at some point to get an instrument rating? And the instrument rating is so important because it allows them to fly through things like clouds in the dark when they've got no visual cues. And so these pilots have to learn to rely completely on their instrument panels. And it's interesting that when there are forces working upon your body in an airplane where you can end up spiraling upside down towards the ground, but because of all the different forces acting upon the body and upon the inner ear, the pilot and the passengers inside that plane it may feel like they're flying perfectly straight, no turbulence, they're flying just right, everything's upright, and they can literally be upside down, flying in a spiral toward the ground. So pilots have to learn to ignore what they're feeling. And they have to learn to trust their instrument panels inside their airplanes completely, explicitly. Because if they don't learn to do that, they will die. And so that's what I'm saying is happening with anybody with an emotional disorder who says, I don't view myself as being unlovable. Or, I like myself. I genuinely like myself and love myself. Or, I genuinely love my wife. Or, I genuinely love my kids. That's the way they feel. But what does the instrument panel say? In recovery, fortunately, we have an instrument panel, and we can learn to trust that instrument panel explicitly. Let me ask you some questions about yourself. Are you often jealous? Are you often jealous? Are you often insecure? Are you reluctant to not be in a relationship, to be single? Reluctant to live alone? Do you have what other people, maybe not you, but do you have what other people would describe as a high dependency on others for childish things, like making appointments, making sure that your car receives regular maintenance, making sure that your bills are paid? Depend on other people to remind you about those things. How about appointments? How about being on time for things? Need other people to remind you about that? Kind of push you along, put a fire under you to get those things done? Are you reluctant to do them? Do they seem burdensome to you? Are you immature, irresponsible with time or with money? Are you possessive? Are you overly concerned about your looks? Are you overly concerned with what people think? When it comes to decisions of clothing, hairstyle, tattoos, car, house, neighborhood, are these things heavily influenced by you imagining whether others will think you look cool, talk cool, drive a cool car, live in a cool house, have a cool things? You catch yourself frequently, how's this going to look, me wearing this shirt? How are other people going to see me in this shirt? How will these sunglasses make me? I want these sunglasses. I'm going to buy these sunglasses only if I think other people will think I look cool in them. Are you overly concerned whether people will think the music you listen to is cool? Do what you imagine other people think influence your playlists? Are the things you claim to like heavily influenced by whether you imagine other people like those things or not? Sports, music, certain topics, politics, history, certain movies, certain trends. Do you, in your imagination, try to think about whether or not other people like those things too, or will think those things are cool before you decide whether you like them yourself? Are you heavily influenced by the desire for others to envy you? Well, there's a good chance you are, because when I look out at the world, that's what's motivating like 3/4 of the planet. The desire to be envied. Before getting into relationships, are you subconsciously or even unconsciously imagining whether or not others will like your potential partner or be jealous of you for being with the potential partner? Is that motivating you? Is that a part of the consideration or a part of your decision-making process about whether or not to get into a relationship with that potential partner? Do you have the reputation of being quick-tempered, or of frequently losing your temper, or of walking around grumpy? Do people feel like they're walking on eggshells around you? Do you have a harder time treating your family better than you treat the people you work with or total strangers out in public? Do you have frequent periods of depression, of feeling hollow? Do you frequently insist on having your own way? Are you frequently insistent that others agree with your opinions? Is it your knee-jerk reaction to get angry when people don't agree with your opinions? Does any appearance about being wrong make you angry? Do you feel attacked anytime somebody points out that you're wrong? Do you take offense, instant offense, at somebody pointing out that you're wrong? All of these things and many, many more. We can't address every single one of them in this one episode of the show. I just pulled these off the top of my head. But all of these things we just listed are the instruments within the cockpit of your airplane going crazy, spinning like little propellers, indicating that you don't love yourself. These are all consequences, symptoms of a person who does not love himself or herself. And that's the very, very short list, by the way. So, how to love yourself for real. We sort of started the conversation off talking about how to do that, right? There's an obstacle. What's the obstacle? The way you view yourself, the way you view your inherent nature. So the number one thing is that you should ask yourself, what prevents a person from loving herself or himself in the first place? We've answered it. The answer is that he or she views himself or herself as unlovable. That means that his or her thinking is that he or she is incapable of being loved. From his or her perspective, his or her very nature is such that she is not able to be loved. There's nothing to love there. You see how that could create problems for a person who wants to love herself or himself? So that's the first and biggest step to learning to love yourself. First, working to recognize that you view yourself as unlovable. It's not, boy, I wish somebody would love me. That's the feeling of being unloved. We're not talking about that. That wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't create the problems that we're talking about. It's not, boy, I sure wish somebody would love me. It's instead, boy, I wish that I was capable of being loved. And once a person works to do that, once they work to recognize that they view themselves that way, himself or herself that way, unlovable, that is to say, not capable of being loved. Once a person puts in that work and sees it, it then becomes a matter of convincing yourself that this perspective is false, how it got there, and all of the reasons why it's false. You see, it's this work that removes the obstacle that is preventing one from being able to love himself or herself. But as long as that obstacle remains, it will continue preventing a person from being able to love himself or herself in any real way. She or he first has to be convinced that he or she or he, reversing the order on those, has to be convinced that he or she is lovable, meaning worthy of being able to be loved. Let's ask this question. Why does not being able to love yourself for real prevent you from being able to love others for real? That's another delusion that a lot of folks I talk to come to me with. Oh, I'm able to love other people. I just can't love myself. No, my friend. If you can't love yourself, you can't love others. Why? because it's not about being loved, it's about your views on whether you yourself are lovable or not. And that is tied into our views about inherent unchangeable realities, remember? So you view the nature of yourself as being unlovable. This creates this impassable barrier for love to get out and for love to get in. Unlovable, again, describes an inherent, permanent, unchangeable reality. All people with emotional disorders view themselves as unlovable, whether they're conscious of this or not. And that means that they're incapable of being loved for real, from their point of view. So from their point of view, here's what happens. Anybody who claims to love them is either exaggerating, lying, or making such claims of love in ignorance. So let's focus on this ignorance part. A person with an emotional disorder unconsciously believes, now remember what the underlying belief is, that I'm unlovable. This is my inherent, permanent, unchangeable condition. So the person with the emotional disorder believes that the other person expressing love is only doing so because that person doesn't know your reality, the reality of your inherent condition. In other words, that person lacks the insight, for whatever reason, to be able to see for real what they're looking at. So they're telling you that they love you, but from your perspective, the person with the emotional disorder, while you might appreciate hearing that, don't forget what the belief that you live with is about your inherent condition. See, here's another important thing about the way that we view ourselves, our inherent nature or our inherent unchangeable permanent reality, is that there's no amount of feedback from outside of us that can convince us that we're not that thing. So if you view yourself as unlovable, meaning that's what you are, what are you? Well, I'm a man, I'm a human being, and I'm unlovable. These are unchangeable realities about me. I'm just pulling this off the cuff. If I look outside the door and I see a cat, and I'm looking at the cat, but I believe that the cat is a dog, does that make the cat a dog? Yeah, that's a perfect example. Think about that. There's a bunch of people standing around and a cat comes walking by, and I look at the cat and we all think it's a dog. All of us are looking at that cat and we're all thinking, that's a dog right there. Does what we believe about that cat have any effect whatsoever on what it really just is? The cat does not suddenly become a dog because all of us think that the cat is a dog. The cat remains a cat no matter what people think. And now we go back to these beliefs about permanent, unchangeable realities about ourselves. If my belief about myself, about my inherent nature, about what I simply am, is that I'm unlovable, will it matter to me how many people around me think I am lovable? No, because we're not talking about whether I'm loved or not, which is a temporary state. We're talking about my views toward my permanent, unchangeable reality. So even if 1 million people around me, they all think I'm lovable, and they all even express it to me, will that have any effect on my understanding of what my inherent nature is? No. My belief, my view and perspective and attitude toward my own self is that my inherent nature, just this unchangeable reality about me, is that I am this thing. That is to say, unlovable. And now all these people around me, they think I'm lovable. Does that convince me? No, because all of us understand that an inherent thing cannot change. I try to explain this so many times. I never feel like I express it clearly enough. That subtlety there, you must sit and think about it. I urge you to sit and try to get at the meaning this very subtle meaning that I'm trying to share with you right here. Just like us looking out the door and seeing that cat and thinking it's a dog does not change the cat into a dog, we know that will not happen, right? You understand that. When I describe that, you say, well, of course not. Of course not. It's still a cat. Do you understand that if I'm walking around with a belief about my inherent nature, like of what I just am, I'm a human being, I'm a man, and I'm unlovable, those three things are my views about unchangeable realities about myself. So now if 100 people around me, they all express to me that they believe that I'm lovable. That is to say, capable of being loved. That will have no effect on me whatsoever. It doesn't change what I think cannot be changed. An unchangeable inherent truth about me. So when I hear these people expressing that they believe I'm lovable, what instead is going on in my head? What's going on in my head is that for whatever reason, these people they're speaking ignorantly. The only reason they're saying that they believe I'm lovable is because they don't know me well enough. They're blind for some reason to the truth about me. That's what I think. The person lacks insight. They can't see what I really am. So, therefore, their expressions of love are not real. Now, here's something important to keep in mind. The person with the disorder can trust that a person expressing love or expressing that they believe that you are lovable, a person with a disorder can trust that the other person truly believes that. So, let's say that I'm the person with the emotional disorder. And somebody's telling me, Brian, you're lovable. You are worthy of being loved. I'm able to trust that the person telling me that believes that. But, either subconsciously or unconsciously, the only reason I believe that they're saying that is because they think I'm something that I'm not. In other words, their expression of those things is revealing to me that they don't know what they're talking about. They mean well, but they just cannot see truly what I am. Let me use an example to try to drive this home. Imagine that you're selling a car to somebody. All right? So you've got this car you're trying to get rid of, and you've put it up for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody comes over, they take a look at the car. Now, something important to know about this car is that you know that it has been in a serious crash. And you know that the car has all these structural problems, all these mechanical and structural problems. You've paid enough to get this thing fixed so that it's got no visual problems. It doesn't have anything visually wrong with it. And for the short term, you know you can drive it around the block a few times and it'll sound just fine. But you're also aware of some more serious problems that it does have that eventually are going to become apparent. Okay, so you've had a lot of body work done on this car. And again, the car has nothing visibly wrong with it. But because of this car crash you've been in and the work that you've had done on this car, at the same time you're aware that it does have serious problems. They're just not visible. With time, there's going to be a ton of problems that are going to become evident. In fact, that's why you're selling it. It doesn't have any value to you any longer, and you just don't want to deal with any of these structural or mechanical problems that are surely just waiting to happen. Now, imagine that the person on Facebook Marketplace shows interest in this car, comes over to see it, and you fail to disclose any of these things to the person who is going to buy this car from you. And as the two of you are going through this business deal, imagine that the buyer of this car keeps gushing about what a great car this is that you're selling to them, and they keep thanking you and thanking you. My goodness, what a beautiful car. I can't believe you're selling me this car. Oh, man, I'm so happy. And they keep talking about how beautiful the car is and of how happy they are that you're selling it to them. Do you believe that they mean what they say? Yes, of course you do. But ask yourself this. Do you believe they know enough about the car for what they are saying to you? In other words, do you believe that they know enough about this car for what they're saying to you to have any value? No, you don't. So, while you might appreciate that they're so happy to be buying the car, at the same time you understand, boy, there's a lot they just don't know what they're saying, because they don't know the reality about this car. So I appreciate what they're saying, but what they're saying is based on ignorance. They don't know what they're looking at. They don't fully understand the true nature of this car that they're looking at. Do you see the lesson there? The point I'm trying to make about people with emotional disorders. When everybody around them standing around saying, Brian, you are lovable. You are lovable. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of being loved. You are capable of being loved. You deserve love. And they're all saying these things to me, but the perspective toward myself that I live with is that I'm incapable of being loved. It's not in my nature. Lovable is not what I am. Remember, inherently, what I am is unlovable, and that's unchangeable. It's an unchangeable reality I'll just have to live the rest of my life with. It's an unchangeable reality I've already lived my whole life with, and that I will continue to have to live with because it's unchangeable. And so these people expressing this, it's like me looking out the window and mistaking a cat for a dog. They don't know what they're saying. They know what they're saying, but they don't know. But what they're saying is not based on the truth as I perceive it. Why is being able to love for real more fulfilling than being loved in return? Real quick, briefly. Number one, being able to love yourself in both senses of the expression, that is to love your own self and then to be able to love others, makes you self-sufficient. I just recently went and I saw a concert by Kathy Mattea, a famous musician. My mom used to love Kathy Mattea when I was growing up. Listen to Kathy Mattea all the time. And so I got to see her in concert here, a really small, intimate concert just a couple weeks ago. And she told this story from the stage. She's up there like trying to tune her guitar and everything like that. And she says, there was this song I heard. Somebody played this song for me, and I loved it. The problem is, she said, I kept wanting to hear that song so bad. But the problem was that the person who played this song for me had never made a recording of the song. So there were 0 recordings of this song out in the world. And she said, I loved the song so much, I walked around like for a long time thinking, golly, I wish I could hear that song again. Then one day she realized, hey, wait a second. I'm a singer. I'm a professional singer. If I just learned the song and I learn how to play it on my guitar and I learn how to sing the song and I learn the lyrics, I can hear that song anytime I want. What did I say? The number one reason for being able to love for real is more fulfilling than being loved in return? Because it makes you self-sufficient. Jesus Christ said, there's more joy in giving than in receiving. Almost all of us are familiar with that, whether we're religious or not. And maybe when we hear that, we think that it only applies to material things, like physical gifts or money. But no, it applies to everything in life. Being able to love for real in a genuine way is more fulfilling than being loved in return. Being able to love authentically creates an environment that follows you around everywhere. Think about that. That if being loved was more fulfilling than loving, what would that mean about our lives, about the world? It would mean that you would be dependent, like your happiness would be dependent on you going and being in places where people love you. But then if you travel and you go somewhere where nobody knows you or anything like that, or you have to go live somewhere where you don't know anybody or where nobody loves you, then your world crumbles. Everything crumbles. You're left deficient and starving for love. But what happens when you are the one? When your fulfillment depends on you loving? See what I mean? About how it creates an environment that never leaves you. You're the center of it. And so wherever you go, there's your fulfillment. It makes you self-sufficient. Here's the summary. The most important things are to recognize that you view yourself as unlovable. Remember the instrument panel on your airplane that's flying through the clouds. Learn to trust that instrument panel. If it says you don't love yourself, you don't. So that means work to recognize that you don't. Work to recognize that you view yourself as unlovable, because viewing yourself as unlovable is the only reason people don't love themselves. It's the only reason. If a person viewed himself or herself as lovable, a natural result of that would be that they love themselves. So recognizing that you live with that unhealthy, false perspective that you're unlovable, which, again, remember, reflects your view of your inherent permanent reality, unchangeable. Remember that lovable or unlovable is not the same as loved or unloved. Loved or unloved simply reflects a very superficial, temporary, changeable state. If I just simply feel unloved, that's easily fixable. Anything that is of a temporary, superficial state is easily changeable. So, for example, I'm sleepy. Sleepy is a superficial, temporary state, easily fixable. What do I got to do? Take a nap. Sleep, get a good night's sleep. Hungry. Hungry is a superficial, temporary state, easily fixable. I just eat something. Frustrated. Frustrated, superficial, temporary state, easy to fix. I just find out what's frustrating me. I get rid of that source, and suddenly my frustration goes away. But things like lovable do not express a superficial, temporary state. They express a permanent, an inherent, permanent, unchangeable reality. Important to focus on that. The problems and the solutions at the root of emotional disorder involve permanent, inherent, permanent, unchangeable realities. They don't none of the real problems, the root of the real problems of emotional disorder, none of them involve superficial temporary things. They all involve inherent permanent realities and our perspectives and beliefs about those things. So once a person does that, they work and they recognize, yeah, boy, Barnett's right. I do view myself, my inherent state, as being one of unlovable. Then the next job is to work to remove that obstacle. As long as that belief is there about your inherent, permanent, unchangeable reality, you cannot love yourself, as we described at the beginning of this discussion. The two things make the other completely impossible. So that obstacle has to be removed. And the way you do that is you work to see all the ways that the belief that you are unlovable is so false, it's ridiculous that the belief ever got there in the first place. It got implanted there. Studying the way that the belief got there, the way that that belief was implanted there, and from who, and how they were always an untrustworthy source of information on these matters to begin with, will be very helpful in you convincing yourself that that belief never belonged there. It was a distortion of thought, a false belief, a false perspective, a deeply ingrained false perspective that was never true. Get it out of there, root it out, and that will open up the way for you to then do the rest of the work to learn to love yourself. And all of that stuff is very, very easy and simple in comparison with this stuff that we've talked about today. So folks, that's the show. I appreciate you listening or watching today. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please do that. The Last Symptom on YouTube or Rumble. And like I said, if you really want to make progress, if you're really serious about making progress, join us at thelastsymptom.locals.com or by downloading the locals.com app from the App Store and then searching for The Last Symptom by Brian Barnett within. Folks, y'all do something nice for yourselves this weekend, and I'll talk at you real soon. Ciao.